Hello and welcome to the Goal is AFL podcast. This is round 10 wrap up. This has been a crazy round. There's been some crazy upsets. There's been some really, really good games. And we are here to dissect it all. Myself, Harrison, thank you so much for joining us. And up here we have Caleb. He is ready to go. He's always excited to talk about AFL. How did you consume
absolutely.
all the AFL media this week?
Yeah, I was going to say, it was one of those rounds where there was a few results where you're like, whoa, can't believe that just happened. You know, West Coast getting their first win of the season. And then obviously the Lions losing, which was a bit disappointing.
Yes.
So I was going to say, I'm interested to get your thoughts on some of these rounds because it definitely was a few twists and turns along the way, that's for sure.
This is the last in a while for the Lions of their Sunday slate of games. They can continue to have Sunday games, which it's interesting. They're not primetime games, but it's a kind of late afternoon. There's definitely going to be a lot of people watching. I just wish that, I don't know, these games were a little bit better. Perhaps I'm just a bit down on it because I'm a Lions fan and we've played pretty poorly in the last couple of weeks. Anyway, we will get to that a little bit later on, but we did kick off. Actually, before we kick off, we will talk about the passing of Adam Selwood, who came off the back of almost 3 months ago. His other brother, Troy Selwood. The media has not officially said the cause of death, but I think we all pretty much know what the cause of death was due to all the messaging that goes around with all of these. So yes, if you do have any mates or friends that are struggling with mental health, definitely need to check up on them. And yeah, very, very sad for the Selwood family. Obviously the huge AFL influence. You still got Joel and Scott Selwood, who both played AFL as well as the other two brothers. Yeah, the Selwood family must be in a world of hurt right now, and we really do feel sorry for them. Some of their teams that they played for did get some good wins this week, so hopefully they kind of had them on their mind as they were doing their having their games. So we are definitely thinking about the Selwoods, but we will move on to the first game of the round, which was the Suns and Darwin, the second of the two games that were in TIO Stadium in Darwin, my old stomping grounds, and so I recognised the settings and the sights and the sounds of that stadium were very familiar to me. So the Suns getting 2 of 2 wins up there and defeating the Hawks. It was a sort of a seesawing affair. Obviously the Hawks, as you can see right at the end, kind of had a bit of a lead, and then the Suns just kind of powered away. So who would have thought that if at the start of the round or start of the year that the Suns and Hawks would have been one of the games of the round in Darwin on a Thursday night? You probably would have been called crazy. But how did you see this game?
Well, I'm glad I got to watch it because coming into it, this was the one I was most intrigued about because, you know, Gold Coast, they're on the rise. They're starting to get some form together. Their team is clicking in all departments, and the Hawks was another big test for them. And the fact that they were able to withstand everything that Hawthorn threw at them because they've got plenty of talent at their disposal, I think they were able to utilize the humidity and the heat to their advantage. Obviously, being a Queensland team, that's something they train in often. So I think, you know, these Melbourne and Victorian teams like to complain constantly about, we have to play in the heat and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, I said this in a couple episodes back. If you want to be a champion of the AFL, you have to be able to deal with all the different climates within Australia. And that's why I think the Queensland teams have a slight advantage over some of those Southerners. So maybe that was a big detriment for Hawthorn and why they weren't able to get the job done. But again, I have a lot of credit for the Gold Coast. And it was a huge result for them up in Darwin.
Yep, it definitely was. We had all the fans and everything. I had a few family members that went there, and they said that it was a pretty fun game. But yeah, Gold Coast getting a win. They moved up to, where were they? They stayed at third on the ladder. They kind of seesawed as the round went, but they settled at third at the end of the round. So Gold Coast looking strong. I think they would definitely almost be locked into finals at this point. Where they finish, obviously, is to be determined. But yeah, looks like the Gold Coast have kind of wrapped up a first finals berth, which is pretty cool for them. Hawthorn looked like I wouldn't take too much away from this. If I was Hawks, I wouldn't be like really disappointed. Obviously, Suns are a good team, so that you're going to have losses, but that was a very,
You live
very
and
good
learn.
game. Yeah, to start off our round 10 of this season. The next game was the Swans, versus Carlton. 78-62 was the final score there. Swans by 16 points, and as you can see by the worm, it was pretty seesawing, and it was tied for a bunch of the game. Midway through the third quarter, it was tied. Carlton did have the lead for a fair amount. The Swans just had too much class on their home deck and kicked away. Had a couple of friends also at this game, and they said that the Swans fans were insufferable, even though it was probably about 50-50 with obviously Carlton fans travelling a lot. But this game was, I don't know, if you're Carlton, just flaky, just really disappointed by some of their results. And, you're up one week, you're down the next. It's just life of a Carlton fan, unfortunately.
Yeah, very much so on the seesaw. If the Gold Coast Hawthorn game was the one I was most intrigued by, this was the game that was the big
Yeah.
blockbuster, the big headline of the round. Because for both of these teams, so much was at stake in terms of momentum, storylines, and where they could end up towards the end of this season. And I think the fact that the Swans got the job done at home was hugely important for them, because if they lost this game, like just every single alarm bell would be ringing in that place. And the fact that they were able to, put up a good performance in front of a crowd that struggled to get into the stadium. I found it hilarious how the turnstiles stopped working at the beginning.
Oh,
And
I didn't actually hear about that. What was
yeah,
that?
yeah. So before the game started, I don't know, the whole, I guess the electronic system that activates all the turnstiles stopped working. So like when the game actually began, half the crowd was outside and
Wow.
half the crowd was inside.
That's
So
wild.
that was a
I didn't hear that.
hilarious
Yeah.
stitch up.
I mean, you wouldn't
But
have
it
really
didn't affect.
noticed. Sometimes
Yeah,
Sydney
exactly.
fans
Well,
don't exactly turn up on time, but yeah, Sydney traffic and
touche.
all that.
But it's one of those things that didn't affect their performance at all. And yes, the game itself was kind of back and forth as well, matching kind of their seasons overall.
Yeah.
But Carlton, I was gonna say it's hard to get a read on them because they do play some good footy. I like how they're really direct and how they penetrate into the forward line, looking for players like Kerno and whatnot. But and he kicked a few, but they just don't look formidable enough. And I think that's a big problem for them. And we've been saying it for weeks now. I just don't know how Michael Voss is going to adapt his style of play to be able to beat every team in the competition if they're going to be towards the top end of the table where their fans think they belong.
We were saying before how you wouldn't have thought at the start of the year that Suns Hawthorn would be a blockbuster game. If you had, looked at this fixture at the start of the season, you'd think that this would have been a teams in the top four, and yet they currently sit 11th and 12th on the ladder. These two teams, so not exactly how we thought it would pan out, and both of these teams would probably be very disappointed with their seasons. So, I think seeing these two play, I think that even if they do make the finals, they will sit in that 8th, 7th position and probably get bounced in the first game. So I just think it's not season over, but it's a really disappointing start to this season for both of these teams, and it kind of just continues with this seesawing back and forth teams, losses and wins. Moving on to our Saturday slate, we had a 78-68 win by Collingwood, who now sit atop of the ladder after Brisbane's loss versus the Adelaide Crows. The Crows were up and about. They definitely had a good start to the game. Keeping it nice and tight. Even in the third quarter, it was pretty much tied. And then, as they've kind of done throughout the season, Collingwood just pulled away at the end and just sort of showed their class, which is, playing at the MCG. A little bit odd that they played this during a day game. Like, it didn't seem to be a huge amount of fans. But yeah, I'm wary of people writing off the Crows or writing in the Crows already, like into the finals. So currently they are 6th. I don't know. This performance against a really good team, I don't know, seemed a little bit flaky to me.
Well, I was going to say, this is what I love about the competitive nature of the AFL is that, teams like Adelaide, who have been, eye-catching so far this season, are still not a shoo-in for the top 8. That's just so exciting to me. But, Collingwood winning at home, it's not that surprising. It's annoying. I obviously don't like it when Collingwood win.
Yeah.
They've obviously taken top spot off the Lions now, which, again, aggravates me even more.
Yeah.
So, look, it's one of those ones for Adelaide. You just got to take these performances, analyze what you did well, what you didn't do well, and then just, improve week on, week out, and just make sure that you are winning your games in Adelaide, because that could be the difference between a good and a bad season for them. Because on the road, if they lose a couple of games, it is what it is. But if you're losing games at home in front of a really riled up Adelaide support, then that's when you might find yourself slipping out of the top 8. And Collingwood, like, they obviously had a lot of motivation. Well, actually, I say that. I don't. Craig McRae said in his post-match press conference that he actually didn't tell the players coming into it. But after the fact, I feel like there would have been an emotional coming together within that club about the whole Selwood situation. So, again, that's another club that has huge ties to that. And Craig McRae seemed pretty disappointed in his post-match presser about that whole situation. So I think it's a big win for them, both mentally and then getting the job done is huge in terms of their table performance.
Well, next week, both of these teams play the 17th and 18th, so 2 bottom teams. So for Adelaide, it's a get-right game kind of against West Coast, and North are playing, Collingwood playing North Melbourne. So, 2 teams that they could potentially boost their percentage against. But with what we've seen in this AFL season, nothing would surprise me if both of those teams just lost the next week. So it's been that kind of season so far.
Bloody North Melbourne, am I right?
Yes. Yes. You've got the next game, which was at Adelaide Oval. This was the struggling Port Adelaide Power versus the Geelong Cats. A little bit of injuries in this game as well. You had Patrick Dangerfield going down with a hamstring. You had Jason Horne-Francis going down with a hamstring as well. It was pretty tight throughout, as you can see, like literally lead changes and tie game for most of the game. And then just Geelong kind of pulling away. Jeremy Cameron kicked 7. Bailey Smith carving it up once again. All these great performances by the Geelong players. And when you see Geelong play like that, you're like, why can't they play like that every week? Maybe it was just because they're playing what is this year one of the worst teams. And we were saying before, like Carlton and Sydney, it's not quite season over. I think it's season over for the Power. I think that if they haven't already discussed, they probably should discuss making that change of the coach now. I don't know if you're feeling that. They've already discussed it, but why are we waiting till the end of the season to make this change? Let's get a head start and put the new guy in and see if we can get some sort of momentum.
Yeah, I can totally understand that perspective and that way of thinking. I think it'll all come down to Ken Hinckley's ego and whether he's willing to step away and bite the bullet. If not, he might just stick it out, bid his farewell, and then be like, I left the club in a worse state than when I found it.
But even if he does leave, like, is anyone going to be like farewelling him in a positive manner? Like,
well,
I don't know.
That's a good question. You have to ask the Port Adelaide fans. Though.
I suppose it matters where they finish at the end of the year. Say they miss the finals, but they win like 4 straight at the end. Does he get like a, hey, good job, now we're set up to continue next year? I don't know. They play Freo next week and they're over at Optus, so I don't really give them much of a chance there. But yeah, if you're a Power fan, really disappointing. If you're a Geelong fan, like, again, frustration that why can't we play like that every week? They have the Bulldogs next week back at home at GMHBA Stadium on Thursday. So that will be actually a very, very good game. Super excited about that one. The Dogs, we'll talk about them actually right now because they were the very next game after this. My bad. They weren't the next game. They were the Saturday night game, but there was one more game that preceded them, which was the Giants getting pretty much flogged by the Freo Dockers there. So 61-95 was the final score. The Dockers won. Probably should have won by more. If you look at the worm here, they did claw back a little bit of goals just towards the end of the fourth quarter. So I think they led by like 45 at one point, about 5 minutes to go, and GWS just kicked a late couple. They pretty much, I think, kept them scoreless for a quarter and 17 minutes, did Freo. So yeah, that was some great defense by them, but also just ineptitude by GWS, who again are kind of proving that they're a little bit flaky and just going to probably sit around that 7 and 8 spot at the end of the year. Yeah, your smile says a lot there, Caleb.
I just don't understand what GWS is about, man. Their bloody stadium's empty constantly. They
Yeah.
play some shoddy football, but then some weeks they're electric and they beat the Cats,
Yeah.
away from home. So
Yeah.
it's like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
But Fremantle, they're another flaky team,
Yeah.
and they were, when you get your favorites box and you get a yellow flake chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you open it up, it's all like flaked everywhere, and you're like, oh, how am I supposed to eat this?
Yeah. Yeah.
This time it was rock solid, and you
Yeah.
could easily eat it.
Yeah.
This was Fremantle this week. They were nice, rock solid, played some good football.
Yeah.
And they got the job done
Yeah.
away from home, which is huge in terms of
Yeah.
ladder performance. Again, climbing themselves up the
Yeah.
table because they haven't been winning games home or away. So the fact that they got a job done against a top 8 rival in GWS is massive for them.
And so that means next week there'll be a loose flake against the team we spoke about just then was Port Adelaide. So that's who they're playing. So next week you can chalk up Port Adelaide for a win because, as you know, Freo have been going week to week with their wins and losses and being a little bit flaky. So again, I don't think there's much else to talk about this game. It was a little bit of a dour affair. Like it was pretty much over at the end of the third quarter, so just some garbage time football at the end there. The game that I was trying to preview before was the Bulldogs and Essendon. Bulldogs absolutely walloped them. They were at
91 points is insane.
It was 56-3, I think, midway through the second quarter, which is crazy, as you can see.
What a shocking first half from Essendon. That's terrible.
Remember we were talking at the start of the year and you kind of previewed a little bit of who you thought was going to be up and down. And you said, what was the team that you said was going to be making the top 8 that you were very surprised about? Was Essendon?
Yeah, well,
I don't feel like that is going to come to fruition with this performance. I don't know. Does this
I don't think so either.
Does this tell us more about the Doggies being good or the Essendon are really, really bad?
No, it definitely says more about the Doggies, that's for sure.
Okay.
The fact that they got the job done by 91 points is a huge testament to them.
Yeah.
The fact that the second half of the season has got its schedule released now, and the Bulldogs have been given a lot of prime time slots on Thursday and Friday night football, respectively, I think is a testament and a belief from the AFL, the fact that this is one of the most entertaining teams in the competition, and we're going to get some blockbusters with them. So I think them dispatching a team like Essendon with such ease says a lot about them, because Essendon, they've had performances like this so far this season where they've just not shown up and they haven't had anything cooking. It's like they're working in the kitchen and they constantly keep burning themselves and have to fucking take 5 minutes out to cool their hands off. It's like you need to stay constantly in it all 4 quarters, and if you're not staying in the action, then the other team's just going to put you away.
Yeah.
And I'm severely disappointed from what I've seen from Essendon so far this season.
Of course.
And based off, the amount of points that they've got on the table so far, top 8 might be beyond them.
I think you're right. Essendon just... I've got obviously a couple of friends who are Essendon fans, and the feeling from them is that this season is just another kind of nothing season. Like they're not terrible, but they're not really building to anything in their mind. Their coach Brad Scott, not new at this point, but I think needs to show some improvement at the later half of this year. Even try and push towards the bottom of the 8 there. So, I mean, I think it'll be. I think the thing to really talk about is the Doggies. That's the thing that I'd want to talk about.
Yeah, no, I agree. The thing that I think is most embarrassing for Brad Scott, if he does miss out on top 8 football, is the fact that he's been in the job basically the same amount of time as Damien Hardwick, and he's had better resources at his disposal, and he's failed, and Hardwick might succeed by getting into top 8 football before him. So if that's the case, again, that's a red flag in my opinion.
No, I hear your point there. There is 3 more games that we are going to talk about, and the first one of the Sunday slate was North Melbourne getting a second win of the year against Richmond. This was a very tight affair. A lot of stoppages in this game. Like, it was very stop-start. Both teams kicked pretty accurately, 11-8, 12-6, and the Kangaroos eventually won by 4 points. It was very tight. Few lead changes around there in the middle of the third quarter. But yeah, Richmond just could not quite get over the top. And I think this was the first win for North Melbourne at the MCG since 2017, which to me was a crazy stat. I don't know how much they play there. Obviously, Marvel is their home ground, and they also play games at Hobart. So yeah, that's wild that they haven't won a game there since 2017. It's pretty crazy, but yeah, good for them. And I think that some of the Kangaroos supporters would probably be feeling a bit better, especially after a draw last week and a win this week. Like, just kind of showing what they probably should have shown at the start of the season. You know, like they smashed Melbourne. You think about it, they absolutely destroyed Melbourne at the start of the year, and then they went on a long losing streak, and now they've come back. You know, I think that sort of performance that they had this week is probably what they wanted for the last couple of weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is a good confidence booster for Alistair Clarkson's men. I don't know, man. I don't have much to say on this because it's bottom of the barrel stuff. Like these teams aren't going to be affecting the competition in any sincere way, and this is just going to be a battle between who's going to finish at the wooden spoon. And
Yeah.
I think North Melbourne getting the job done is again good for their fans. Tiger Army's obviously going to be upset, but you know the fact that it was a close game, I think, is probably a good sign for the Tigers. Because there's nothing worse than getting blown out of the water by a fellow bottom of the table rival.
Yeah, I think if you're Richmond fan, you're definitely a little bit okay. Not okay with a loss, obviously, it sucks, but you know, playing tight games, which they have done a lot this year. They haven't really got blown out a huge amount. They're not like incredibly bad, but I'd definitely be happier with this season than I probably thought going into it if I was a Tigers fan. You know what I mean? Like they thought maybe you'd get no wins or one win, and they got 3 wins already after 10 rounds. It's not terrible. That's pretty good. So the middle game, which is probably one we're going to dwell on a little bit more because we are, most people probably know, both Lions fans. This is a very, very frustrating game. When you look at the Worm, you'd think that the Lions probably should have won this game pretty handily, but something happened like 5 minutes into the fourth quarter where Melbourne just suddenly kicked into gear and they just suddenly looked like the Melbourne of 2021. I don't know what happened. And
Max Gawn happened.
And then that's my point. I think the best player on the ground by a very, very, very long margin was Max Gawn. Brisbane lost their ruckman, Oscar McInerney, pretty late on. He was named in the team and then was out with soreness. So we basically had a backup ruckman and Eric Hipwood doing some stuff in the forward line. So, yeah, Gawn was just everywhere, marking down the line. Their midfielders, Harris Andrews played a terrible game. He's had a very down year. Midfield didn't perform. Some good performances by like Kitty Coleman who came back. I agree with that. Lester was a good performer. Lester was very good. McCluggage had a decent game. Ashcroft, both of them had pretty down games. Trying to think of who else. Kai Lohman definitely still injured.
Charlie Cameron
had a terrible game. I think it was about 50-50. Either you had a terrible game or a good game. And some of the terrible games were really terrible. Yeah, man, this was not good. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, the fact that Brisbane are the architects of their own downfall is severely disappointing because you have no one to blame but yourself. And the fact that they started off the game playing some really exciting football, but they weren't able to capitalize on the scoreboard is, again, their own fault. And then by the fourth quarter, I don't know what happened in the 3-quarter time break with Simon Goodwin and his men, but they just were able to flick a switch and just control the football and get marks inside 50 and capitalize on the scoreboard on every occasion. Even if they weren't goals, they were just scoring behinds and continuing that scoreboard pressure. And the Lions, not kicking, they only scored 1 goal in the final quarter. That is terrible. Just not good enough at home. And they can't, the crowd got into it. They were supporting the team and they just still didn't step up. And it's, very, very disappointing for the Lions not to get the job done against a team, again, coming into it, I wanted to be boosting our percentage with. So it's 2 games in a row where I've been like, this is a game to smash them. And we've not got the 4 points on both occasions.
Yeah. And, some of the other performers, I guess, for positives for Melbourne were Jake Melksham had a very good game. The guy with probably the second most punchable face in the league. When I say that, I just mean a guy who just looks like he's just nasty. First, obviously, being Braden Maynard from Collingwood, but he's definitely number 2 is Jake Melksham. He always seems to get up against Brisbane. There's always these players that seem to always play very well against us. I don't know if that's like game
Clayton
style.
Oliver's, Clayton Oliver locking down Lockie Neal as well.
It was a bit frustrating, and now that's the last 4 games for the Lions are loss, win, draw, loss. So not great. However, we do still sit in second spot at 7-2-1. So there are positives, but we were in 12th spot at this point last year. We are where Sydney was. So it just shows that anything can happen, and I guess we are sometimes the products of our own downfall when we play like that.
I just hope complacency's not creeping into the
Yeah.
squad, because we started off the season so slowly, and yet we were able to get the wins.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just am curious to
that
understand the
might be it.
psychology of the players being like, all right, well, we don't need to be playing our best football to win. And
Yeah.
then that's just continued every single week. And
Yeah.
now teams are starting to step up in terms of tempo and play style,
Yeah.
and we're just not matching them. And, it's your famous saying, AFL is like, what, 90% effort or whatever you say?
Yeah, it's a lot. A lot of it is effort. And I think our highest tackle getter was Ryan Lester with 5, and second was Darcy Ford. So Ruckman as your second leading tackler just shows a lack of effort. And I think that there's a little bit of fire needs to be instilled in some of these guys, like Levi Ashcroft, guys like that who come into the team but still need to put in the work and actually kind of earn their place, not just because they're skilled, but because they put in effort. But yeah, we'll move on from that one. The next game, which was the last game, was the West Coast Eagles getting their first win of the year against St Kilda. This was 108-80. Not very close. This game, it was pretty much the Eagles all the way. As you can kind of see there, it was back and forth a little bit in the first quarter, but yeah, the Eagles just kicked away, and Saints kind of like Freo, a little bit flaky. They are currently, if I grab my ladder, the Saints are currently sitting at 13. So that's kind of where I expected them to be honest, at the start of the year. They had a good patch, and then now they've kind of come back down to earth. What were your thoughts on this one? I don't think you probably would have seen much of this game. Would you?
I just watched the highlights before we got this podcast
I've watched
started.
the highlights too.
So, yeah, for me, my interpretation of what I was shown is that they were very direct with their football, and lots of kicks inside 50 and marks that led to goals. And I think that direct approach is good for the Eagles because they've got some tall players down there that can affect the scoreboard, like Oscar Allen, Harley Reid when he gets down there. He played a really good game. He's just almost too good for the Eagles. It's just sad to say. But I'm just, again, this probably was one of the biggest surprises for me in terms of the scoreboard. I just can't believe the Eagles won. Like, St Kilda are a half-decent outfit, and the Eagles are shocking.
Yeah.
They've only got one good player in their team. And the fact that they got up for this game, again, I was not watching the game, so I don't understand all the preamble before it, but I wonder if the Selwood passing away had anything to do with the players' psychology and pushed them and motivated them more. And if that's the case, then if you're an Eagles fan, is there not something to be said about, is this team mentally there? Because they should be like that every week, being, mentally aroused to go into the contest every single week. So you don't understand what I'm saying.
I never want to hear you say the word aroused in any
they were not
context.
Stimulated coming into the game.
That's even. It's almost as bad. Stimulated. Oh man, but yeah, that was
That's my question mark about the Eagles. So it's good for them that they got the win in Perth, but yeah, I just don't know. I don't understand why they performed so well in this game and not in previous.
I just think it's it's the nature of football being up and down so much. West Coast travel probably got a little bit to St Kilda there. Who knows? But yeah, this is the final game of the round, and that means that our ladder looks a little bit like this. So Collingwood on top there on 32 points. The Brisbane Lions sitting just below on 30 points. The Gold Coast there on 28. Hawthorn, Western Bulldogs, I should say. Adelaide, Geelong, and GWS. So kind of a very steady top 8. We've seen this top 8 pretty much for the last 3 or 4 rounds, I think. There's not really been much movement in terms of people coming in and out of the top. There's been some movement within the top 8. But yeah, I think that we're getting pretty settled with the top 8 here. There's obviously a couple of teams that trying to get in, which, as you can see by the bottom of the ladder, you got Freo, Essendon, Carlton, Sydney, all kind of in that stacked bunch there, along with surprisingly Melbourne, Port Adelaide, and then Richmond, North, and West Coast basically making up the ranks down there. So, I think that there are still going to be a couple teams that are going to come in. I don't think this is exactly... It would be very surprising to me if this was exactly the top 8 that we're going to have for the rest of the year. But, there's some surprises. There's some disappointments sitting in this ladder. Is there anything that kind of stands out to you with that top 8 and then bottom 10?
Well, it's the bottom 10 that is most intriguing to me, because the teams that are on the fringes are teams that definitely would have expected to be in there.
Yeah.
The fact that Fremantle are right on the edge now, I think is good for them. Will keep them motivated to kind of push back in. But again, you never quite know what you're going to get with them. But yeah, seeing Port Adelaide down so low is just, it's a weird sight to behold.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fact that Melbourne are now on 16 points, good on them, because I didn't anticipate them being 14th at this stage of the season. I expected them to be right down there with North Melbourne and West Coast. So, yeah,
me too. I definitely didn't expect them to be there. So, it kind of goes to show that when you do have some good players still left over, like, Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, a bunch of veterans, they can still get up for that occasional win. And unfortunately, that occasion came up last night against the Brisbane Lions. So, man, this was I wouldn't say a down round. It was just a bit of a... Maybe I'm just feeling a bit down because the Lions lost, but it just didn't feel as strong as last week. Didn't have as many close finishes. Did you kind of feel that a little bit this week?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah,
it was pretty mid.
Yeah, it's kind of mid-season. Everyone's kind of in the flow of things. Kind of felt a little bit routine, so to speak. But there are a ton of good games next week, which we've already kind of spoken about. You got the Thursday night game of Geelong and Western Bulldogs. That's a really, really good game. The Dreamtime game on Friday night. That always kind of brings out the best in both those teams, even though both of them are pretty low down on the ladder. GWS Carlton is a pretty good game over there at Marvel Stadium. And then what I think is probably the biggest game for the year for the Lions so far. I guess the Collingwood one was big, but against the Hawks at the MCG, that's pretty big. Yeah, and we always... I can't remember the last time we even beat the Hawks, to be honest. Like, even when they were bad for a couple of years, we still lost to them. It was really frustrating. They always kind of had the wood on us. But, we've got that game, and then you've got, as we spoke about before, Freo and Port Adelaide on Saturday night. And then the last couple of games is Adelaide versus West Coast and Melbourne versus Sydney, which was, pretty mid game. And then you've got St Kilda versus the Suns. So, man, there's a lot of so-so games, but there's a couple of cracking games. So it could be shaping up to be a similar week to this week. But, as we spoke about before, AFL this year has been crazy. So we could have some very tight games, even though a lot of these teams aren't exactly high flying. So anything else you want to say, Caleb, before we wrap up? Was there anything from this round? What was your biggest highlight of the round?
I think the thing that I'll walk away with the most is the fact that the Gold Coast won again. And they've played one less game compared to the rest of the competition.
That's true.
They did play an opening round and won. They could be top of the table. And that's just a crazy thing to think.
Yeah, they are ahead of Collingwood on percentage. And if they had won one more game, if they played one more game, they will be on top. So, yeah, that's pretty wild. And I think... they're playing St Kilda next week, so all chances that by the end they could be sitting on top. Man, we're 10 rounds in, not technically 11 rounds in. I'm loving having football every week. It's a good time of year. The weather's changing. It's a routine. As you can see, I'm wearing a jumper. Loving the weather. Good weather in Brisbane this week. It was an awesome weekend. So again, thank you so much to everyone for watching. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much to Caleb for joining me. As always, we enjoying doing the podcast. Thank you so much to everybody for watching. Have a good day.